I became interested in television news at a very early age. By the time I was 8 years old, I was watching the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite every night.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
In high school, along with being a two-year starter in football, I was involved in debate and forensics, which involves competing in various kinds of speaking contests. At college at Michigan State, I worked on campus radio as a DJ and as a newscaster, was a walk-on quarterback and place kicker on the football team for 2 years. In fact, my only football highlight was this boneheaded play against Notre Dame, where I threw an interception.
Interception, Mike Townsend.
I left college early to enlist in the Navy and worked as a broadcaster with AFRTS, the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. After 4 years in the Navy, I was honorably discharged and began my civilian career in news and broadcasting, first as a show announcer at SeaWorld in San Diego, California. After stints as a TV news reporter at the CBS station in my hometown of Lansing, Michigan, and at Channel 6 right here in Columbus, I went to Memphis, Tennessee to work as a reporter and an anchor, where my work got me 4 Associated Press Awards for broadcast news excellence. One award for this piece on the Live Aid concerts on July 13th, 1985.
You've been in very good company. An estimated 1.5 billion people are believed to have seen or heard what's being called the world's greatest musical event. The U.S. portion of that event in Philadelphia is still going on at this hour. Organizers say the Live Aid concerts have raised over $20 million so far to help starving people in Africa. They're rocking the night away in Philadelphia. Over 90,000 people in person, maybe a billion others in front of TV sets or radios. There has been nothing like it before. There may never be anything like it again. Live Aid, a rock concert with the loftiest of goals to end the starvation of millions of people in Africa.
This is to bring the plight in Africa to the homes of all the people in the world.
The Live Aid effort began this morning in London. There, rock greats like David Bowie, Elton John, and Paul McCartney performed in Wembley Stadium. Mid-Southerner B.B. King pitched in by doing some fancy guitar picking from Holland. About mid-morning Memphis time, dozens more rock and rhythm and blues greats took center stage in Philadelphia's JFK Stadium. Through the use of technology rivaling that for a space mission, folks worldwide heard and saw the London and Philadelphia concerts. They also heard constant pleas for donations.
Hunger hasn't ended yet, so we can't afford to let up. But
promoters say the pleas are being heard. An oil sheik pledged over £1 million British pounds. That's well over $1 million American dollars.
£1 million quid. £1 million quid. Well done. Fantastic. Great.
Organizers of the Live Aid effort admit it's going to take months for the money being raised to reach the folks for whom it's intended. But the encouraging thing is help is on the way, and there are millions of people to thank for it.
After Memphis, I was hired to be the prime anchor at the ABC TV station in Jackson, Mississippi.
And Stephanie, a lot of money is exactly what the survivors of 4 of the Space Shuttle Challenger astronauts are going to be getting from the government. The Justice Department announced today the families have agreed to a settlement of all...
From Mississippi, it was on to Buffalo, New York, to work as a weekend anchor at one of the best stations in the nation, WKBW.
We tried several times during the course of this day and evening to contact the 3 subjects of the SEC investigation. Those attempts were not successful. Given the sensitive nature of this story, we are withholding their names to give them every reasonable opportunity to get back to us with their side of the story.
And then it was back to my hometown of Lansing to become the city's first black primetime anchor at the ABC affiliate station.
Good evening, everyone. Here's what's happening on the news beat. A Lansing family may be lucky to be alive this evening. Their home on the city's southwest side caught fire.
For nearly 5 years in the mid to late 1990s, I served as head of public information and chief spokesman for the Michigan Department of Corrections, the state's prison system.
During a recent editorial, Channel 4 called for a corrections overhaul. We couldn't agree more. Michigan must overhaul a system in which the prisoner population is growing unabated and which is gobbling up an increasingly disproportionate share of state funding. 15 years ago, 3 cents out of every dollar from the state's general fund went to run the Department of Corrections. Today, that figure is 15 cents out of every general revenue dollar. You know, we must be tough on crime, but we should also be smart. And that means, among other things, being prudent about our usage of Michigan's expensive prison beds. If we aren't, we'll need to build about 2 new prisons every year simply to keep pace with the increase in our prisoner population. This department has been calling for alternative punishment options for several years. We have, for example, pushed for expanding the boot camp program and for empowering counties to punish low-level offenders at the local level. To date, those proposals have not been enacted by the legislature. Until we can control the growth of our prison population, Michigan will simply not be able to do more than warehouse inmates. With a current cost per prisoner of $24,000 a year, to suggest otherwise is little more than a pipe dream.
For the past couple of years, I've been focused on launching and running my own business, a video production and public affairs company called The Right Stuff. My primary undertaking for the past year has been production of a news analysis and commentary program called The Wrap. It has been posted on internet platforms like YouTube and Facebook and airing nationwide on the Black Premier Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The Wrap, a review of some of the past week's most important, intriguing, strange, and inspirational news happenings. Up front in this edition, a simple question. Would African Americans be better off without Barack Obama as president? That's what Tea Party activist Kevin Jackson believes. Jackson, himself a black man, recently wrote a blog post which has caused a bit of buzz. It was entitled, "America Needs a White Republican President." Much of the post was, I felt, nonsense. However, the general topic was certainly thought-provoking, especially when making it race-specific. Could the many problems still plaguing the nation's black community be better addressed with a white person in the Oval Office?
So help you God?
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President. All the best wishes.
It began on a cold January day in 2009 with high hopes that change for the better was coming. But after nearly 5 years in office, some of the more pressing problems in the black community have not improved under Barack Obama.
The country's back to pretty much where it was when this president started. White people in this country are doing a bit better. Black folks are doing a full point worse.
The current unemployment rate for blacks is slightly higher now than it was in January 2009 when Mr. Obama became president. For blacks with a college degree, their jobless rate has doubled since 2007. Median family income for black Americans has fallen 10% during the Obama years. And more troubling, the net worth of the average African American household is now 22 times less than the average white household. The wealth gap between blacks and whites was 20 times greater when George W. Bush was president.
Take off your bedroom slippers. Put on your marching shoes. Shake it off. Stop complaining. Stop grumbling. Stop crying. We are going to press on. We've got work to do.
We have got 42% of our black children living in poverty. 22% we talked about before. People living in poverty. They have a right to cry. They have a right to have legitimate grievances. So I think the president ought to apologize. I think he ought to ask for our forgiveness.
In education, the high school graduation rate for black males, a key indicator of future economic success, has risen during the past decade, but most of that happened during the Bush presidency. Under Mr. Obama, the graduation rate of black men has continued to lag far behind that of whites. In many of the nation's major cities, like Detroit, the current black graduation rate is less than 30%.
Latinos asking them for something, and they got something. Gay and lesbian said, don't ask, don't tell, changed it. Jewish brothers and sisters said, deal with Israel, deal with it. All of those are specific entities. Why is it when it comes to Negroes? Why is it when it comes to black folk? All of a sudden we are persona non grata. I tell you, Mr. Obama, to deal with the black agenda is what every president before you had to do.
Under President Ronald Reagan, black-owned business income rose nearly 50%, and the black middle class expanded by a third. During the Obama presidency, the reverse has happened. Black business income down and the black middle class shrinking. The black incarceration rate is essentially unchanged during the Obama presidency. While George Bush was in office, the imprisonment rate for black men fell nearly 10%. Recent surveys indicate race relations have worsened a bit since Obama became president. On issues of race, President Obama has been criticized as being somewhat tepid, not aggressive or proactive enough.
Many African Americans would love to see President Obama talk more about their communities specifically, talk about their needs specifically, and be engaged in their immediate communities.
When he visited Gorée Island in Senegal, once a prime port for exporting African slaves to America, Mr. Obama simply called the visit a powerful moment.
To be able to visit this site, I think gives me even greater motivation in terms of the defense of human rights around the world.
10 years earlier, George Bush went to Gorée Island to deliver a speech denouncing slavery in the strongest possible terms.
At this place, liberty and life were stolen and sold. One of the largest migrations of history was also one of the greatest crimes of history. A republic founded on equality for all became a prison for millions.
Many doubt that Obama would have been able to push through Congress measures like civil rights and voting rights, which President Lyndon Johnson was able to do, or that Mr. Obama would have been as aggressive as LBJ in combating groups like the Ku Klux Klan.
So if Klansmen hear my voice today, let it be both an appeal and a warning to get out of the Ku Klux Klan now and return to a decent society before it is too late.
It's entirely possible that racism may be playing a role in preventing Barack Obama from doing more to address problems which disproportionately impact black Americans. The level of vitriol and disrespect toward President Obama seems unprecedented in the nation's history. He was publicly called a liar by South Carolina Representative Joe Wilson during a joint address to Congress.
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally. It's not true.
And since the day he was first inaugurated, white conservatives have made a conscious effort to vitiate, which is to make ineffective, the Obama presidency.
I know what his politics are. I know what his plans are, as he has stated them. I don't want them to succeed. I hope he fails.
And yet, despite the obstructionism and the vitriol, President Obama has an impressive list of accomplishments, from staving off an economic meltdown with an $800 billion stimulus package, to killing Osama bin Laden, to enacting credit card reforms benefiting all American consumers, to helping to rescue the U.S. auto industry. On the wrap, I provide an in-depth look at issues like same-sex marriage.
Is now legal or about to become legal in 16 states and the District of Columbia. And though it's gaining in support, or at least acceptance, there is still significant and seemingly entrenched opposition to same-sex marriage.
Senate Bill 1, House Draft 1 passes final reading. Madam Clerk.
Hawaii has become the 15th state to say aloha to gay marriage. Same-sex weddings will begin there on December 2nd. Quite a turnaround for our 50th state. which just 15 years ago became the first state to pass a constitutional amendment against gay marriage. There's no question public support for marriage equality is on the rise.
I hope that we honor each other's differences and celebrate the life that we have together in Hawaii, irrespective of the diverse views we hold on this subject.
According to Gallup opinion polls, only 27% of Americans favored same-sex marriage in March of 1996. 10 years later, approval was up to 39%. In May of 2010, the number was 44%. And in July of this year, a clear majority, 54% of Americans, supported marriage equality for gays and lesbians.
Thank you for making me a second-class citizen. No. You're a second-class.
Opposition to same-sex marriage is mostly based on religious grounds, with the three major religions in the U.S., Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all relying on Scripture as the basis for their view of same-sex relationships as wrong.
We feel that sodomy and the whole LGBT agenda is a rebellion against God.
I read the Scripture. That's what I believe, that the Scripture condemns it or says it's a sin.
Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13. If a man also lie with mankind as he lies with a woman, they have committed an abomination.
Some in the clergy believe that while the Scriptures are infallible, man's interpretation of them often is not.
People have misused the Bible from the beginning of time to support bloody crusades and terrible inquisitions, to support slavery and apartheid and segregation, to support the second-class citizenship of women.
Around the world, views of homosexuality vary greatly. In 4 countries, Canada, the Netherlands, Spain, and Belgium, same-sex marriage is completely legal. In 76 nations, being a homosexual is against the law. And in 7 countries in the Middle East and Africa, homosexuality is punishable by death. In the African nation of Uganda, there's a growing movement led by Christian pastor Martin Sempa to make homosexuality there a capital crime.
So I've done research. This is what they do. Number one, you can see a man here having sucked the other person's and the other person is poo-pooing, and this one is eating the poo-poo all over the place. Tell me, when you have a law against homosexuality, do you say except eating poo-poo?
Pope Francis, the leader of the world's 1.3 billion Catholics, raised some eyebrows a few months back by saying that proclaiming the saving grace and love of Christ is more important than constantly speaking out on moral issues like gay marriage.
The Pope saying, quote, "If someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge?"
The Nobel Peace Prize winner, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, also favors extending God's love to the gay community rather than talking about God's scorn.
I can't, from the life of me, imagine that God would say, I am going to punish you because you are black. I punish you because you are homosexual. You ought to have been heterosexual.
One of the central questions in the debate over gay marriage and acceptance of homosexuality in general is same-sex attraction a matter of nature or nurture? Does God make folks gay, or do they choose homosexuality?
Scott and I are gay. We were gay from the... God made us gay. We were born gay. No one can tell us that's not true.
It's a choice you make. It's a sinful choice.
Did you make a choice to be heterosexual?
I don't think I had to make a choice to be heterosexual. I think that's a natural thing.
Wait a minute. In other words, one is a choice and one is not.
Yeah.
While scientists have yet to find the smoking gun, a gay gene, a growing number of them say they share the same view, that same-sex orientation is shaped for most gay people at a very early age through complex interactions of biological, psychological, and social factors.
Owing to a few popular studies conducted in the past 20 years, the leading thought is that homosexuality is genetic. It's something you inherit. Although pinpointing a specific gene has been very tricky business.
President Obama, apparently like many other Americans, had a change of heart and mind about gay marriage, announcing in May of 2012 that he had evolved on the issue and finally supported same-sex marriage.
At a certain point, I've just concluded that for me personally, it is important for me to go ahead and affirm that I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
The U.S. military has allowed openly gay service since September 2011, when the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was rescinded. And since earlier this year, the military has extended the same benefits to married gay couples that traditional married service people have enjoyed. With gay marriage being made legal in New York State, the West Point Military Academy, located in upstate New York, has begun playing host to gay wedding ceremonies. And after these so-called setup pieces, I offer commentary on the issues in a segment called My Two Cents.
It has been 50 years since the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Combined with Dr. Martin Luther King's iconic I Have a Dream speech, it's considered by many to be the crowning event of the civil rights movement. As a 9-year-old boy, I watched Dr. King's speech on TV from home in Lansing, Michigan.
So come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy.
For me, watching the speech was a bittersweet experience. I was supposed to have been among the 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial for those famous remarks from Dr. King. My grandfather, Reverend Otis Warren, an associate of Dr. King's, was planning to take me there. However, my Big Daddy died July 15th, 6 weeks before the march. A few weeks back, to mark the golden anniversary of the March on Washington, thousands were on hand in the nation's capital to recreate the event. Over the past several weeks, many have been giving their assessment of how far black folks have come since 1963, of how close we've come to realizing Dr. King's dream.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Well, Dr. King's little children have all grown up, are in their early to mid-50s now, and are all successful adults, though his oldest daughter, Yolanda, died in 2007 at the age of 51.
I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream.
In Mississippi today, 16% of the students at its signature university, Ole Miss, are black. A major advance, though still disproportionate with Mississippi's population, which is 38% black. In 1963, there was only one black student at Ole Miss, James Meredith. Also a sign of changing times, Mississippi now has the largest number of black elected officials in the nation.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
In Alabama, black boys and white boys are now united as members of the nation's #1 college football team. By most measures, black Americans are better off now than 50 years ago. The visible symbols of segregation and racism mostly gone now. Those things, racism and segregation, still exist, though to a lesser degree today. In education, for instance, blacks have made significant progress. In 1963, only 26% of blacks had completed high school. Now that figure is 85%. The black poverty rate has fallen from 42% to 28%, though that figure is still nearly double the poverty rate for whites. As far as voting is concerned,
Last year's presidential election marked the first time in U.S. history that African Americans voted at a higher rate than whites. Now, not everything for blacks these days is better than 50 years ago. The black unemployment rate is higher now. In 1963, black men were 5 times as likely as white men to be jailed or imprisoned. Today, blacks are 6 times as likely to be locked up. The income gap between black and white households is wider in terms of actual dollars than it was 50 years ago. The marriage rate for blacks is half what it was in 1963. The unwed birth rate has more than doubled.
I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
A recent poll done by the Pew Research Center found that fewer than 1 in 3 black Americans feel the nation has made enough significant progress toward achieving racial equality. For whites, the figure is less than half. 70% of blacks and 25% of whites feel blacks are not treated equally by the criminal justice system. But that progress has been made is beyond dispute. A mixed-race man, Barack Obama, considered black by American standards, is the nation's chief executive. And a black man, Eric Holder, is the nation's highest law enforcement official as the U.S. Attorney General. We have black CEOs of major corporations, black astronauts, black military generals and admirals, African Americans in nearly every kind of professional pursuit. Black folks have never been more woven into the very fabric of American life as they are today. My personal overall assessment, things for black folks are pretty good in 2013. Still not great, but the nation that my children and grandchildren have been born into is much improved over the one I came into in 1954. A country in which Jim Crow segregation was still the law throughout the South, where millions of black folks below the Mason-Dixon line remained disenfranchised. Interracial marriage was still illegal in nearly 20 states. Yes, for black folks, the America of 2013 is far more inclusive, more tolerant, more enlightened, and offers far more opportunity to succeed than the America of 50 years ago. But, to quote the late Senator Ted Kennedy, the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die. And that is my 2 cents for this week.